Good afternoon and welcome to another episode on the challenges and triumph of online teaching during this pandemic at the Female Educators Roundtable with your host, Debby Enoe from Teacher Success Coach, and another one of my guests from around the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Introduce yourself, tell us where you come from and what level you teach, etc. Thank you.
Okay, well, hello everyone out there. My name is Myra McDonald, and I'm coming to you live from the United States. And I have a role as a reading specialist inside a elementary school. Actually, I teach at the Anthony B. Series School in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. So it's a small city in the state of New Jersey within the United States of America. And that is where I'm coming to you from today. And I'm so excited to be here with you.
Okay. Oh, right. Sorry. Oh, gosh. Okay, sorry guys, I've just been having some challenges with this camera. Thank you for that, Mara. Welcome on board. Okay, today we were going to look at negotiating the different platforms. However, if you tell us what it was like or what it is like to actually be teaching on the online platform in relationship to being a teacher or an educator in the physical classroom, how things have been, share it, please.
Well, this whole experience has been life-altering and changing for educators as a whole. And I can speak for myself, coming from a position of now being outside of the classroom for the last 5-6 years in the role of a reading specialist. I have had to look at my teachers endure different struggles from the classroom perspective and see how all of our roles have changed. We were literally asked to change everything we knew about education and revamp it within as little as 2 weeks. And then it just stretched on to the next 3-4 months. So everything that we've come to know and learn about how to teach, what to teach, the way we teach has had to change from being in person to, in some aspects, online learning and going virtually. But then there were also situations where students, we got to see the digital gap that is existing within the United States, where some of our students didn't even have the opportunities to continue an education virtually because they had no access to technology. So we have seen, while in a way some of our students have not been completely affected because they have still been able to engage with their teachers at some part, we have seen where there's such a divide within our country here for students who might not have the advantages to keep up with what's happening at this time. So what the question is, what happens to them? Where does their learning go? So everything has completely changed for education as we know it.
Thank you. That's interesting because sometimes people under the assumption that when you transition to online, everybody have access to online. But it's really good that you've actually pointed out that not every student have full access to go online. Even though, in the cases, you're looking at places like America and it is a developed country. And yet still, a lot of students don't have the basic to go online. So it's quite sad, especially for us as educators, where your role, where our role is to impact knowledge by whatever means necessary. And when you feel as if your hands are tied, isn't it?
Yes, because the experiences that you have now teaching online, you don't have the same connection with the students. We have used in my district Google Meets and Zoom as the two platforms that we've tried to initiate using as a virtual method of teaching. And it just takes away that closeness and the connection of being an educator and really embracing your students. And because now you're just kind of behind this screen and it's almost like a wall for the students. So they know you're there, but it allows them to tune out so much more quickly. So I can't physically go up to them and touch them and say, hey, are you doing okay? Because maybe they didn't get a good night's sleep, and maybe something else is going on. And things that we don't see as a teacher, but we know intuitively when we see our students that something's not right, we don't have that access to them anymore, because it's sort of like they're just staring at us, and you don't know if they're engaged, because you don't have control over that anymore. You have no control over whether they choose to stay, whether they can join in, can to you or not. If they decide to say, I'm going to click my screen off so you can't see my face, I can't do anything about it. So as teachers, we are sometimes controllers at nature. We need to control our environment, have everything okay. And when you don't have the ability to do that as an educator, it just kind of puts you in a position to say, oh, you're in control, not me. To adjust and continue to go and do the best I can for them. But we're really not in control right now.
It's interesting. Thank you for that. Yesterday, I was talking to another educator, and that's the same thing as educators. Whether or not we want to accept it, we are control obsessed, right?
Yes, yes. Because our rooms, our classrooms, our spaces, that's our environment. And we are the owners of that environment. We don't negotiate everything that happens there. Sometimes it's on our terms. We embrace our children. We include them in, but ultimately that's our space. And now we're completely out of our space. And it's a different world, learning how to navigate situations and assist parents at the same time, and not be able to really, really connect with them in the same way. It's a different light on the field as a whole.
Thank you. How has it been for you? Because you have to support your educators, you have to support your students, and then you have to support your parents. What has that been like?
Well, initially when this all started, we were basically in school, and we received a message, we received information that we had to put together packets because we didn't know what was happening. And so it was determined that we would be out of school for 2 weeks. So this all started in March. We were, I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. And we were just told we have to get these packets together. The students have to have enough work for at least 2 weeks until we can return back to school. So it was like my job instantly stopped. The whole focus was on helping and putting work together, making sure the students don't fall behind for 2 weeks. What can we do? So it was almost like within that small time frame, those few days, it was like, okay, stop what you're doing. Let's get some work going, and we'll see what happens in 2 weeks. The only thing that happened was we never stepped foot back into our rooms from that day. And so no one was thinking at the time that you're not coming back. Take everything you need. Educate, we're pack rats. I need everything to teach. So it was the idea of, okay, take some essential things, but we're coming back. This is going to be figured out. So the thought process of not knowing that you were never stepping foot back into your classroom was pretty surreal after you realized it, because I didn't take a lot of things home that I said, oh, I wish I could have had this, or now I want to help a teacher with a lesson, and I have to figure out, I had to transfer my brain and say, okay, I don't have these books or these materials, so what can I do? So I work with students directly. I work with students who struggle with reading, who don't have the ability to read. So my biggest worry and concern was, how do I reach those students who need a multisensory approach, who need tactile things in front of them to achieve their learning success? My role was, in the beginning, was supporting my teachers in the best way I could, coming up with different lessons, but I was not performing my actual job anymore. And that was a tough feeling for me to actually have to get through and adjust to, because I didn't serve the same purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I was there, but I wasn't serving the same purpose.
Yeah. The other reason, the reason why you felt so bad as well, because as educators, we are controlled obsessed.
Yes.
So,
And I
because you.
control over how I couldn't. There's some students we never reached. So there's
Mhm.
some students that I have had no contact with since March. And those were some of my students who struggled the most. And to not know if they were okay, to not know what's happening with them, was a complete struggle because they weren't engaged in the classrooms online with the teachers, or they weren't logged into the Google Classroom to see if they were working, if they needed help. So just losing the ability to approach them and check in them was really difficult. And just thinking about everything I know as an educator, or I come to learn as an educator, children have different learning styles. So
Mm,
they
mm,
teach kids from the very beginning. Not everyone learns the same way.
mm,
And so when you're in the classroom, you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to bring this group. You guys are going to come over here with me, and I have an activity, and we're going to do this over here. And then
mm,
I want this group. You guys are going to go over here. You're going to listen to a story. And so
mm.
we were forced to take children and say, I understand that you struggle with reading and you learn this way, but now everyone's forced to learn in almost a specific way, where the idea of differentiation now has to change for teachers, because it's possible to do online for in certain circumstances, but not in the same way to reach the students. And so every student is not a visual learner, doesn't have the opportunity to have objects and things in front of them. So just not being able to adjust and teach students with different learning styles and abilities online, it's a challenge.
Mm, mm, mm.
It's a challenge.
Mm. Especially, thank you. One of the big thing is, especially when you do not have the control and
Yeah.
you cannot easily just go and say, okay, I'll take this or go over there. As you rightly say, one of the biggest challenge for me with the online platform, there are lots, but this one is in terms of differentiation. The students are differentiating for themselves. They're deciding whether or not they feel comfortable to put the cameras on.
Yes.
They really want to talk to us. They want to engage, or do they really want to be in this group with the set of students they're in? So they're actually making a decision for themselves.
And the older students, I'm sure older students really, really have more of that ownership in it, because they understand this world. They're digital natives. And so they really can decide, you know what, I'm not logging in, or I'm not showing my face. And you're right, they can't. We can't force them to do it. With working with younger students, sometimes you have more of the guidance of the parents, and they're like, no, I'm logging you on, you're here. But when I have an incident and I have a student that I'm sitting there and I'm teaching a lesson, and he just gets up and he just starts running around with his little brother, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. Because of privacy laws as well, we don't even have the ability to mute their computers and things like that after they're on. We don't have the ability to control that. So that is another huge struggle that I have experienced, where working with the younger students, they're not conscious enough to say, I'm here and everyone's looking at me and everyone sees what's going on, or hears everything that's going on in my world, because it's their world. They're not used to us invading or being in their space. And so when you have incidents that happen inside a home that you have no control over, nothing you can do, I can't turn up their sound and say, okay, we're going to stop. All I can do is end the entire meeting, but that would end it for everyone. And then it's like trying to get back in and get everybody back together. Just about 6, 7, 8-year-olds, their process, their thought process, their development, I don't know if it's fully mature enough for this online platform, unless it's they have to be almost bred or groomed into it to understand it, because they just know that they were ripped out of their world of what they know, the structure of school, and now they're home. But home is now has to be school, but those two places are totally different. Some of us come to school, and that's the only time they have structure.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're home and they're in their own environment, we can't force our structure upon them because, again, we're out of control when there's
Exactly, isn't it? Because you see, I've had incidents where students deciding that they don't want to be online, they're taking their laptop, switching it off and just running away with the laptop, all sorts.
Yes, it's definitely been an experience. And I think moving forward, there's so much education that has to happen because we don't know, and particularly with my experience, we haven't been told indefinitely what our next steps are. Are we going back to school physically? Are we remaining on a virtual status? So we don't know, and not knowing is a heavy part because it's hard to plan, it's hard to figure things out. And I know sometimes people think as educators, oh, you're home, you have time off. And when I tell you, switching over to a virtual learning process has probably been one of the most challenging situations in my career. It definitely has been one of the most challenging situations because, again, I'm coming from a situation where I wasn't inside the classroom. So I had no idea what Google Classroom really was. I knew about it. I dabbled in it a little bit sometimes with the kids, but my teachers were using it constantly because we had moved on to this in the last 10 years. They've been moving to a digital process of working with students. I left the classroom during that time. So classroom to me was, oh, what are you guys doing there? That's different. I'm still, no, paper and pen. We need So I had to learn, I had a lot to learn in a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Navigate online platforms and work digitally more in the last 6 months than I ever had in my entire 20 years of teaching.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, isn't it? Whereby you had no choice, crash course. And the interesting thing about the crash course is, in most cases, not anybody giving it to you, is good on YouTube that is giving you this crash course.
Yes. And what's the interesting thing is because so many times within education, especially more in, I would say, the last 10 years, the power of educators is sometimes stripped away. And we're the last people, the teachers in the classroom, the people who work directly with the students are usually the last people that are asked, what do you think we need to do? What do you think we need for the students? What do our children need? How do we make this happen? A lot of times we're just given directives, and we're in the United States. People come in and say, okay, we're going to do this, and this. This is the program that's being used. We spent $100,000 on this. This is where we're going because this is where the money has been spent. Doesn't mean that it's the best choice, but it means this is where we're going. And in this process of having to be outside of the classroom and teach virtually, they had no choice but to allow educators to figure it out, because for the first time, they didn't have the answer. They said, oh, you're doing this wrong. I'm going to evaluation this way. So they had to let us figure it out. One of the opportunities where educators, we roll up our sleeves like we usually do. You get in there and you figure it out. But sometimes our voices are not heard the way they need to be. In a situation when nobody knows what to do.
Thank you. This is fantastic, because this is the only time we actually have autonomy in relationship to what we do is on the online platform. As you rightly say, they don't know how to figure it out, so nobody could tell us what to do.
Nobody can tell us, okay, well, we're going to stay on for this many hours, or we're going to use only Google Meet. So no one had any clue that we were not returning back to school, what was going to happen. Their major concern was get as many kids on as you can. We can't lose the kids, but there's no directive to tell us what to do. And I think this was an opportunity for teachers to have a voice to say, we work hard at what we do, and we love what we do. And more teachers stay on and stay extra hours and stay late, and we don't get our summers off because all of us don't make the money that fulfills our lifestyle. So when people say, oh, you're a teacher, you're an educator, you get your summers off. No, I usually work throughout the summers as well. But just having a voice of what's happening next. I think if we empower ourselves now as educators and really stand up and say, hey, this is best, or this isn't best, if we move forward online, maybe they'll listen. Maybe we'll be listened to this time, because we're in a state of, we're not sure what's next, and we still want the best for our students moving forward. And a lot of times the people outside on top, if you lost that sense of what it's like to be grounded back in that classroom with those students, the decision-making process gets lost sometimes. So I'm hoping that with all of this going on, that it gives educators and teachers that voice again.
Yeah, thank you. That would be fantastic, because we are the one who knows the students. We are the one who are in the front line of the students. We are the one that knows what works with our students. Right. And it is sad that we are normally given the directives. But it is so fantastic now that nobody gives us directive, because nobody knows.
Yeah. And just having an opportunity and voice has, it's been challenging, but it has also forced me to learn something different. Most educators, good educators, great educators, we're always learning. We never stop. We might know the subject we're teaching. We might have been teaching the same grade level for the last 10 years, but we have to constantly keep abreast of what's happening, what's changed, what's different. We're not sitting at a computer typing in information. We're building the minds, the people who are going to run this next generation. We have a lot of pressure on us. And sometimes I've been in constant thought recently of, well, who are they going to blame later on? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we see that there's a gap that has been created, a learning gap has been created for a lot of our students.
Yeah.
When they don't pass the test, they come at well, what happened? Why aren't your students passing this test? Because you don't want me to teach them how to read. You want me to teach them how to pass this test.
Yes, exactly.
And with all the situation with COVID-19, what happened? The tests became completely irrelevant.
Exactly.
Our standardized tests, are they as relevant as we want to presume that they are when they're canceled? To be continued. We don't even know. We as educators are put on the hot spots we catch the brunt of the accusation of not doing a good job and not doing it right. And lo and behold, what the people, the bureaucracy has been saying, oh, well, we have to measure the student learning. We have to do it this way. And it's completely out of the window and out of anyone's control. All we have to do now is teach.
Exactly, isn't it? That's it. That's the, you see, that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no option than to teach or assess them from what we were teaching them before in the physical classroom. So it is so amazing when we have always been saying the standardized test and not a clear representation of a student's ability. No, they don't want to hear us, because who are you to be saying that? And look what happens.
We're just the teachers. We're just supposed to go in and teach what you're telling us to do. But my theory is, and I speak it a lot, and I tell a lot of my teachers, I say, sometimes we have to do what's in our heart, and we have to do what we know is right. And I said, any administrator, any person above you comes to you and says, stop doing that, it's working, then there's an issue in that piece there. Because no one's going to tell you to stop doing something if it's working, but we have to have that confidence and that bravery as educators to do what we think is right and make sure that our students are learning as well. And this has been the opportunity to get in there and figure out some new things without anyone else being able to tell us, no, not that way. Can't do this. You have to do it this way. Use these materials. It was sort of like, we don't know what to tell you. You guys are doing a great job. Just keep going. So.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because as an educator, I feel when I'm doing something and I feel that I'm doing it right, you could sack me if you want to, that's your business. I am going with my conviction because I'm looking at it in the best interest of the student, and I know more than what you know, because I'm teaching them and I'm looking at what is working. There's some things I feel very strongly about, and I've had so many issues with some of my manager, and I'm saying, hold on, I'm doing it like that, take it or leave it. I said, the only thing you could do is sack me, and you know what? I'm going to get another job. Because you see, there's sometimes we have to follow our conviction, because it's important, especially when you're a teaching student and you see what's working, and they're saying to you, oh no, you need to do this assessment this way, you need to only give them 3-4 chances. Hell no, I'm giving them 1 chance because I'm checking their ability. If you don't like it, sack me, because I feel what I'm doing is right. And I think as educators, we need to be strong enough and be true to ourselves when we actually taking on this education leaders.
Yes, because if we're not empowered as educators, then how are we going to empower our students? If we know something is not working, it's very difficult for me to continue to do something and expect a different response if I'm doing the same thing. And so, especially when we're constantly having to shift and move. So, within the educational system, we're always given things to do. These textbooks, use this platform, use this program, use these steps. And so to have the freedom at this point in my career to say, I don't even know if what I'm doing is best right now, but I'm going to figure out some different things. But I have a little bit of freedom to do that more than I always have, because sometimes I just have to close my door and do what I need to do. And then when you come in my door, you're welcome in my space, but this is my zone and my space. But navigating outside of the classroom in this aspect and trying to figure things out, it will either push you as an educator, or it will leave you stuck or frustrated. So now is the time as educators that we have to take that next step and say, okay, we don't even know how to completely navigate this world outside of our comfort zone. What can we do? And most educators, we're up for the challenge. We like I said, I didn't know much about Google Classroom, and now I'm running 3 different Google Classrooms, and I've created digital worksheets, and I'm like, hey, what's this YouTube video here? And there's so many resources out there that we constantly are open to, and just the opportunity to move forward as educators. I hope, the one thing I do hope during this whole time is that the respect and the value of educators changes, especially in this country. Sometimes within the United States, we're not respected as teachers. We're just teachers. Oh, you teach. So our value in our work does not always meet the amount of money that we make. So there's some educators, they said, go home, go online and teach. Well, what if you have roommates? What if you're living in a space where you don't have this opportunity to just open your world up to and work from an online platform? The consideration wasn't made, that thought wasn't taken in. It was just, okay, we have to figure this out. And if you don't have the ability to do it, it's not fair for educators. But I really do hope that the respect and the acknowledgement of what we do for a living for children changes, because it's so important.
The thing about it is, I don't think the thing was education would change, of teachers would change, because there would still, this is just a temporary measure. It's still going to be back to normal again.
Yes, I do know that, yes, eventually we're going to return to our environments. What that looks like in totality, we don't know. But if anything can be learned from this period and everything that's happening, it's just the idea that just because you're not inside the classroom anymore, and you are the administrator or you are the supervisor, it doesn't mean that you have all of the answers to say, okay, we're going to do this. And we can't let money drive the decisions of what's happening with students and education, because right now, I think of all the money was spent before we were ordering things for next year and preparing for our usual routine. And my thought process has been, okay, if we don't return in September, how can we be supported? How are we going to support educators virtually now that we have some ideas, a little bit of momentum of how to function? What kind of support is going to be there? How are we where are we spending that money for the students? If I'm a science teacher, how do I actively engage my students in science without them actually conducting an experiment? The online platform still gives us that visual aspect, but it's still just screen time.
Exactly.
And when you think about just the effects, we say, don't stay on your phone. You don't need to be on that screen. Turn off that game. You need to be engaged. And 3-4 months, it has been, okay, we have going to put you on the screen for 3 hours, 4 hours. We need you to be on this screen. Developmentally, I'm thinking about the changes that are happening in my students in their brain development. I'm talking about students who have been now subjected to going online, being in front of the screen, and what that's going to look like for them as they get older, because there are some effects of children being on screen time. And even over the years, in schools, we've kind of implemented more screen time as we go, not knowing the true effects of it at this point in time. So we don't know what's going to happen to our kids.
That's very, very true. Very, very true. Thank you. Another question is, how long have you had, in terms of hours or minutes, how long do you have the students on the platform?
Well, right now I'm working with our program. We have a summer program that's going on. And so the students are actually on for 3 hours of the day. So the students log on from 9 a.m. in the morning and they remain online until 11:50 in the afternoon. And the teachers switch and move within the classes. So I go to 3 different Google Classrooms, but the students are on. So they might log off to take a 2-minute break, but then their responsibility is to log back on to go to their next class. And this has been different because when we initially first went into virtual learning, because there wasn't, a solid plan or anything put in place, I was just logging on to teachers' classrooms. They might meet once or twice a week via Zoom, and most of their work was independent through Google Classroom. But to be online with the students and know that they have been online for 3 hours, by the time I get to my last session some days, they're kind of just like, hello, is it?
They're thrown out.
So I'm like, you have to be extra bubbly and try to motivate them and say, come on, we got just one more hour, we're gonna get through it. So I think it's a lot on the students, especially at the younger ages. Developmentally, we don't expect a 5, 6-year-old to be still or be complacent for a half hour on end, let alone an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours. So I hope that districts and states here will kind of take these opportunities as learning curves and learning experiences to figure out some things that could work or may not work, to make the adjustments for them, because the students, they can get brain from it. Because we're not as entertaining as TV.
Exactly. The thing about it, who decided, because you say you guys have 3-hour session with the students, who decided that each session have to be an hour?
I think it's just a trial period. I think
okay.
No real knowledge of what to do. So it was sort of like, well, let's try this, because the program only runs for a month. So I think we're just sort of in a trial period of figuring it out and seeing what information and data you get from this end and the conclusion of it. So it's just another experiment. I feel like there's so many experiments in education going on right now that we'll look back on and say, wow, that was not the best idea. But I think at this point in time, there's just such an unreadiness and uncertainty with education that it's like, well, let's roll the dice and see what happens. The only issue with that is that we're not dealing with numbers and facts and figures. We're dealing with real lives.
Yeah, that is so fantastic. It is true. And in education, I often feel that the powers that be forces us to feel and to think that we're dealing with numbers.
Yes. When we start looking at students as a number, as data, then you lose the aspect of what you're teaching, how you're teaching, and who you're teaching. Because sometimes that number is just a number. It does not represent what I can do as a learner. It doesn't represent how I learn as a learner. It just represents where you put me. And when we put those numbers and those labels on children, sometimes they live with that. The one thing our children are knowledgeable about what we think, what we see them as. And so when we see them as numbers or facts and figures, then how do you think that they might feel, And not being able to assess, just thinking about how do we assess our students during this whole time has been running through my head constantly, because I'm not sitting there with them doing my initial assessments and listening to them read and making my marks. I've had to figure this out in a different way to say, okay, how can I have a classroom full of 6, 7, 8 students online, but I only need to hear one student? So it's like renegotiating classroom management, not having control over your classroom management, because I want to test or assess the student in the best way I can, but I can't control my class.
And that goes again to educators' control.
I can't control my class. I don't have the bell that rings off. It says, okay, inside voices. It's like everybody's, oh, please mute your computers, please mute. And they're like, oh, they're gone. They went to go have a sandwich. So yeah, just moving forward and thinking of how to navigate this world for as long as we have to navigate within it is going to be a continuous learning experience. Because should we go back to school in person in a relatively periodic amount of time, what does that mean? I have not seen, my students have not been assessed. So where are they really? I haven't seen some kids since we left school. So just the idea of going back and saying, where do you begin? Because being online has definitely not been the same as being in person, of course. It's serving a purpose. It's given us a platform to reach our students. But I just have this feeling that as educators, we're walking back into this world to say, okay, where do we start? Where do we go from here? Because I don't know if my students were reading at home or engaged or doing something else. Some of my students, they have the opportunities to go. Some of my students were learning from a hotel room where you know, they're transient kids. They have situations going on in their families. They don't have access to books and things all the time. So to think about going back to school in person, after this subsides, the thought process is it weighs heavily, because we just, where do we go? Where do we begin?
It is so very true, though. Thank you for that. It's true. I never thought of the way do we begin. I've always thought of, okay, I'm not too sure the powers that be are really thinking in relationship to the psychological and emotional aspect of those children and the educators when we go back into this, classroom, whatever it's going to look like. Bearing in mind there have been so many issues with the online platform for the students and the educator. What will things look like? How are we going to negotiate the whole thing? Because we now have a set of traumatized, vulnerable young people coming back to us. And some of us ourselves are in the same position, vulnerable, traumatized. How is that going to work?
Yes. Just and we have to look at how those socio-emotional aspects affect their learning. Just in the classroom, when we see them in person, we know that a lot of our students, if they face adversary within their lives, it affects the way they learn and how they process it. So now the shift of being taken away, not fully understanding. I speak to some of my students in the first and second, third grades, and they understand this concept of, yes, there's this virus and we have to be careful, and we don't know what's going to happen, and that's why we were out of school. But we don't know whose family members were affected,
Exactly.
whose parents were directly affected, siblings. So all of those socio-emotional aspects that they're dealing with during this whole period, to make that shift then back to school and say, okay, how can we embrace these students and figure out, we can't even just start jumping into academics, because we have to look at the child as a whole. Like, they're readjusting back to an environment that's different for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so very true. That's why in every session, as much as possible, we actually tap into the emotional and psychological aspect, because it is a big thing, because we are one of the only industry that will be going back with a whole pile of people we need to be dealing with.
Yes.
With us, we're talking about a set of 29, 30, etc. And in a lot of cases, we're not dealing with adults here, we're dealing with children. That's the difference, because someone will say, okay, well, when a manager goes back, he has the staff to deal with. Sorry, they're adults.
Right. Right.
That's the difference. We've got this vulnerable, it's three-pronged: the vulnerable, the trauma, and the confused. Because some of them are so confused, they don't even know, and on top of that, some of them would be withdrawn. Right. Because they don't know what to do, how to do, they don't know anything at all. And then we will have to try to unpack this.
Right. And they're looking at educators to do it. They're looking at, we walk back into a world and we tell the students, okay, I know you're happy to be back in school. I know you want to see your friends, but you can't touch them. You can't have lunch with them. You can't go to recess with them. You can't socialize and be up close. You can't show her your picture. You work in this world that unbeknownst to us is lacks comfort and empathy and sympathy. And it's that the world we're moving to. And as educators, it is one of the greatest challenges for me would be to not want to give that student a hug and say, Miss McDonald is so proud of you. You did such a great job. And that has somebody come to me and say, oh, you can't do that. We have to social distance. And sometimes a child day turns around and they learn so much more if they're just given a hug and say, you did a great job. We can get this. But with all of those aspects being possibly removed from the situation, we don't just teach children academics, we teach them how to socialize, how to interact, how to engage. And so when those components are not there, how do we exist? If this is the new normal, it's our children are definitely going through some situations where we need to adjust to that social emotional aspect.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It is so very true, because as we know, even before this, in the classroom, there are not enough counselors or therapists in schools. And we were already fulfilling the role of a counselor, therapist, a coach, a mentor. We were wearing 20 or 30 hats. Now, when we go back, we'll be wearing one hat more than any of the others, and that would either be the therapist or the counseling. And a lot of us are not fully trained. For me, I'm fortunate because of my background, where I'm coming from, etc. The fact that, my background is psychology and CBT, so that's not an issue. But there's some educators who have no idea. They'll have to learn on the job. They have no choice, because they have to support this young person who is in turmoil. They might have lost a family member, a grandmother or something, and they're now coming back to school. And then you're saying on top of all of this, you're saying to them, well, social distancing. My concern is, how are we as educators going to cope?
Right. That's a big challenge for us moving forward, because we learning to embrace our students and let them know that things are going to be okay when we don't even know if things are going to be okay. It's hard. The thought of it is frightening to me, because the districts are just, they're doing what they have to do to try to put protocol in place to try to have some kind of normalcy, but there's nothing normal here for our students at this point in time. And unless we have the opportunities to just sit and talk, and sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes students learn from having a conversation. Sometimes I've had to give my students the opportunity online. I said, go ahead, talk to each other. You guys can talk. have that opportunity, because what if they're not talking? What if there's no one to talk to?
Exactly. Exactly. You know, as educators, that's one of the things we need to be so mindful of. You know, yes, they might be coming from a family, they might be in a family, but the question is, which is crucial, are they able to communicate with this family they're living with? What are the situation like? What are they going through? Are they able to feel comfortable in talking and expressing their feelings? So when they actually come back to us, or even on the online platform, that's a lot of things we have to do. We need to give the students the space to talk, because sometimes, as you rightly say, that's all they want to do, because they have not seen each other and they just want to talk.
Yeah, I made it a fact of doing that. When we were still in our school year, I used the opportunity I had, because I didn't have a class of my own. I set up platforms and times for the students to just come in. And I called it our story time or our book time. I said, well, Miss McDonald's going to read a book. And then after I read the book, we talked about it a little bit. And I did it especially for my third and fourth graders.
Mm.
And after I would read the book and, we talked about it, I said, you guys can talk to each other. And when they just would open up and, oh my
Mm.
goodness, what did you do yesterday? Because I didn't get to go out. And are you playing this game? And I just would sit back and, moderate. And as long as I told them, I said, well, we have our rules here. We're watching our language. We're keeping everything in control. They just needed that space and time to talk to each other.
Mm.
Hadn't had, and I thought that was so beneficial. I just was doing it as, okay, well, let me do some reading, because I like to read, to the students. And I said, well, let's see how this goes. And I started to notice with my older students, my third and fourth graders, they became my largest population coming on, because I did it with the entire grade level. So I had I had almost as many 25, 30 students on at a time, who just wanted to pop in and say things to each other or show each other something. And I just allowed them that opportunity to do it, because they hadn't had they saw each other in their classes. But what about the friends that they made outside those classes at lunchtime, and gym? So I tried to give them that opportunity, because I thought that was important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, as we know as educators, that time we have to unpack those students before we actually start giving them the intellectual knowledge, because they come to us in the physical classroom with a lot of baggage on the backpack. So we need to start unpacking those baggages so we can actually get to as close as to the bottom, if they allow you to, before you start teaching them. Because there's sometimes, I know there's some lessons, I might have half of the lesson where students just want to talk. I have to give them that, because there is no point, nothing is going in at all.
Right. Yeah,
so could you imagine when they come back now to us from this setup?
Yeah, they're gonna have so many just questions, just information out there. Like, what do we do? It's definitely something we have to look at and navigate. We're not teaching robots. We're teaching people. We're teaching and we're teaching future generations. And we need, as educators, we have a lot on our plates always.
Yep.
Always have a lot on our plates to reach the next person who's the senator or the governor or the president of the United States. We are the people who help create those people into the people that they become. So it is our duty and our job to take care of them and make sure that they're whole when they're coming back to us, because they're coming with a lot. We're coming with a lot as educators back on our plate. So it's like we have to deal with our things in order to be there for them again as well.
Yeah, because you see, thank you, because when you look at it, there are a set of broken people, broken students, broken educators. Some of the family would also be broken. So it's like we having these broken students come in some cases, to these broken teachers.
Right.
And these educators have to try as much as possible to see how much they could fix before the broken students come to us.
Right.
'Cause
And
that's what,
educators have to build, we have to be conscious of that relationship that we have with parents, and we have to, that door has to be open a little bit wider, and on both sides, where I'm hoping that parents were able to look at this situation and say, you know what, I didn't know my child as well as I wanted to say I knew my child, or break down those defenses where, you know, so I understand some parents where they don't want to feel the failure of their students because it's a failure upon them. And so when you're telling a parent, you know, we need your child to repeat this grade, and we want them to have more of an opportunity to succeed. And as a parent, it's almost sometimes an attack to say, oh, I don't, my child, I don't want them to say back, but it's not. I get it. You didn't do anything wrong. And so to think about it now, where we have parents who are essential workers who are not able to sit there during this time and log their students into Google Classroom and make sure that they're completing their assignments and getting things done. So it's just an empathy on both sides that has to happen, so that teachers don't create the mentality of, well, what's going on over there? Why are you guys not working with this child or doing this? And then parents, vice versa, saying, well, what are you doing here? Why is this not working? Because we're in an environment that's unknown to either one of us. So just that empathy and that support between educators and parents has to change in a different way, so that we're working together for the support.
Exactly. Thank you. The connection with the parents is crucial in order for this relationship to work. And it's interesting because one of the things I constantly think about, you know, how much we do not always have the connection with the parents. And you've said something earlier on, you know, you hope that now this situation have happened, there'll be far more respect for educators. As I said earlier on, it's just a temporary measure because the mind is very fickle. We have a way of forgetting all of this because we're in crisis mode. When we come out of crisis mode, educators are still going to be treated in the way they used to be treated because they forget. Parents and society forget that these were the group of people that were praising in the same way they were praising essential workers. These are the same people you see a lot of memes on educators. Oh my goodness, you guys, I really appreciate you guys. How you guys are doing this. And you guys have 20 and 30 students and I've only got 3 and they're driving me mad. And on and on and on they go. But personally, I don't think that is going to last. Just come September, and as you rightly said, the gap in the education when they're saying, oh, my child did not achieve, so what are you going to do about it? There's nothing we could do. It was COVID.
Right.
You see, they're not going to be interested in that. And you still have the politicians still asking us, what are we going to do? What can we do?
Right.
You see, that's the whole thing. I'm not too sure if they're actually thinking right that there is nothing we could do until we go back into the physical classroom and say, okay, we will have to do a number of intervention, i.e. evening time, lunchtime, weekends. Yes, that's how we got to look at it. All for now, we don't know what's happening. You know, because as we know, the online platform wasn't something that was planned and operated in the same way as the physical classroom. Online could work well, providing that the whole process is done in the same way as the physical classroom, because we know that if you want to do a degree, if you want to do a PhD, if you want to do a master, you could do it online quite well, that's no problem. But it's got to be planned in the same way in terms of the assessment, the giving of the information, etc. But right now, this wasn't a plan, it was, here, you know, you guys have to get the students and make sure they attend, give them this, give them that. There's nothing planned. It is so ad hoc.
Right. It completely is. There is, no plan. There was, of course, they couldn't, there was not time to put a plan or anything in place. But I don't even think moving forward now that there's a solid plan to put in place, because again, there's no research out on this. I mean, there are some online schools, academies that have been functioning now over 20 years or so, but it's like you said, they're functioning with all the components and pieces in place that they need. They may be sending kids home to their students and saying, these are your learning tools, this is what you need. So when that student is logging on every day, they have what they need there. We're just figuring this out. There's no research, there's no articles, there's nothing. This is the research. this is the experimentation right here. These are the situations happening where if it comes to a time period where we have to not be actively engaged physically, where we have some basis of like what happens, but we don't have any. This is the research that's being done right now as educators.
Yeah. And it's interesting though, because it is a research and it's like figuring it out the next level. That's the whole thing about it. Is okay, because I've seen a number of research, a number of questions on various educators, platforms, and it's like various teaching platform, Facebook, etc. And they said, okay, well, we're doing some research. We know you guys have been in the class on the online class platform. What are the problems? How, what are the psychological effects this is having on you, and how do you think it's affecting your students? And I'm standing there just reading this thing. I'm laughing. I'm thinking, really? Really? It's really it's the whole thing have changed the whole paradigm of education, because as I kept saying, every industry have changed, whether or not they have embraced technology, however they've changed, they've actually moved on with technology, because we're now living in a technological society. However, education was one of the industry that did not move anywhere. It was still static. And the beautiful thing about it is COVID to sorry have actually forced us to readjust and reassess the whole way we teach.
Right. Yeah, the complete whole way. And it's just it's an additional platform at this point in time.
Yeah.
I don't think anything beats in-person instruction, because of those connections and just being physically present with the students. But at least this gives another opportunity as well for us to say, okay, well, I don't think we're getting snow days anymore. I don't think we'll be getting snow days where I live anymore, because that snow day will probably turn into a virtual learning day.
Exactly, isn't it? That's why, because when you look at it as, I think there's so many positive issues come out of this, right? In the sense that some of the parents that we may not normally be able to reach because they're working different times, they cannot come to parents consultation. You want them to come in as an emergency, but they have to survive because they have to go to work. You can say, that's no problem. Whenever you come from us, just let us know. We'll have a meeting on Zoom or whatever.
And I don't think people were open to that idea before this time. It was always that in person, oh, you have to get you into school, you have to come here. And we stay in school a lot of times to meet with our parents. And so just that opportunity to be able to reach and connect, because it's not that parents don't want to be engaged or want to participate. Sometimes they have things in life that they have to deal with. They have work, they have to other children, they have things to attend to. So this actually can be another platform to say, you know what? Okay, so I may be in my classroom before my day is ending, but if you have time while you're leaving work or during your lunch hour break, I'll send you the Zoom link. We can discuss some of the matters and go over things. So that loss of oh, they didn't show up for the one night that we have to come accept the report card or to come speak with the teachers. They didn't lose that one opportunity that they were given.
Yeah.
And or sometimes as teachers, we don't have the time to make all of these calls. So if we can schedule it, like, I would rather be able to sit at home and say, you know what, okay, I'm going to send you a link. Let's just have a discussion about your child then.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't have to be long, but we can get some things out and clear. And I think that will also increase the communication and the support between educators and parents.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is the thing from this.
Yeah, I do, I do feel so too. Plus, it's going to mean that, it means that educators have more flexibility. You don't have to always be in this parents consultation until 8, 9 o'clock. That could be done online. You could have a conference with parents online. You see, so I personally feel that the future of education is brighter for me, post-COVID, after we've actually dealt with the emotional and psychological trauma that we have coming back. I think that there's so much more we can do as educators, with this new normal situation we have and these new skills that we've actually gained, not through choice, I'm afraid, through necessity. And I do feel that we need to make the most of it. And I also feel that educators leaders need to make the most of it instead of putting pressure on educators to do things which are not necessary, which we can actually now start using alternative to complete these things.
I hope so. I really hope so.
I really do, because or else it's going to mean it's just a waste of time. After we've done all this, we've learned all the skills, we go back to where we have been. There's no way we could go back to where we have been, but they really cannot bring us back close as where we have been. It doesn't make sense.
No, I agree.
Doesn't make sense.
We have to learn something from this experience in order to continue on and be successful as educators.
Yeah. And I really feel that this should be, like a stepping stone to empower educators to be more, in terms of have more autonomy within the classroom and how and what and where they teach.
Right.
I really do hope so, because we cannot be teaching in the same way that our grandparents have been taught. And that's exactly what the classroom looks like and feel like. Because when I see pictures of, during the World War I, II, how classroom used to be, I'm afraid it's the same way the classrooms are right now. So I just think that a shift is necessary.
And this has definitely been the shift. We are definitely in the middle of this shift, and I think we need to just learn from it and move forward in the best way possible, because the children that are going through this now are the ones who are going to be the adults later on, and they're not going to forget this experience. They're going to remember, oh, when I was in second grade, I didn't go to school for half a year because we had a pandemic that we experienced. I never thought in my lifetime I would be living through something like this. This is
exactly.
Like my entire world was altered. I do think we have to think about that moving forward and the way our students learn and how this has affected them and the way they might not be able to adjust back to what we think is normal. Like, we have to embrace their ideas of their tech. They love technology. I learned a lot from my students just being online. They had to teach me how to do a few things. I'm like, wait, well, let me see. If I go in Google Classroom, they're like, well, no, go to the assignment. And I'm like, okay. They had to teach me a few things because they're the digital natives. They know this inside and out. And I think if we don't forget that as educators, we don't forget that they have some information that can help support us too as we move on. Ask the student. I tell my parents when they say, "Oh, well, I tried to get into the class," I said, "You know what? Ask your daughter. She knows how to do it."
Yeah.
And they do. And they want to be able to tell you that, "Oh, I know how to do this, Miss McDonald. Let me show you."
Yeah. It's interesting though, because we had one set of students who were that way. We had another set of students who had no idea. So that's the situation. We had one set of students who they were learning with us from those that knew, right?
Yes, and it just, I think, and the majority of the students who can adapt and move in this way will be okay at some point in time. You know, we just have to make sure that we concern ourselves and we really focus. We don't lose our attention on those students who may have special needs or may learn in a different way, because those students, we need equity for them during this. They didn't have equity during this period. So we need to make sure that we don't forget that going back. And how do we really reach those students who need that extra support more than anything else? Because they might be the ones that we're losing right now because they can't navigate this world, you know? So.
Oh boy. The online platform. Can you hear me, Myra?
I can, yes.
Yes, the online platform once again. Oh, the challenges. All of a sudden, Zoom did whatever it did just now. I don't know. Could you imagine? I've been having so many challenges with this platform sometimes, and that's exactly what we've been doing in terms of teaching our students. So all we have to do sometimes is just breathe and let it go.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I've just lost you. What did
we can do at this point in time? Sometimes it's just breathe.
Yeah, and let it go. Just breathe and let it go. Because just now we just completely lost the whole platform. Okay, thank you very much for that. What tips can you give educators in relationship to navigating, in relationship to all that you spoke about?
I don't know if it's a tip more than it is just some words of encouragement. We are educators. We are teaching our children to learn and to navigate not just the classroom, but the world and the society that they live in. And so I would just encourage and press educators to think about your experience during this time and reach inside and see, what does it say about you as an educator? Are you willing to forge on through the battles and push towards success? You know, I know it's been frustrating. I know that there have been so many challenges, but just keep your heads up, just keep moving through and teach from here. Continue to teach from here and do what you think is best. And the students will be successful just because you think they will be successful.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic, actually. Thank you. And I really do feel that we really need to teach, very, very true, from a place of your intuition. It doesn't matter what anybody say to you. You need to be teaching from deep in there, especially if you have the passion. That's why I keep on saying to people, once I feel that what I'm doing is right, I'm not interested in terms of the leaders, in terms of the principal, etc. As long as what I'm doing I feel is right, I am going to stick to my conviction, true to myself. It doesn't matter what the cost is going to be. As long as when I do something, I feel that it is in the best interest of my students. I'm passionate about what I do. My students are always the forefront. Whatever the principal and the leaders feel, that's for them to deal with. As I've always said to every one of them, the only thing you could do is sack me. And that's no problem. because I'm true to my conviction and I believe what I do. So therefore, if I'm going to do something and I feel, okay, I feel so strongly about it, I am going to do it because I feel that it is in the best interest of my students. And I feel as educators that sometimes we need to be much more, we need to take that on board much more. I understand that not everybody feel as confident and empowered as I do or some other educators, but I also feel that once you are so convicted and convinced of what you're doing, I feel you just need to go with it. Mm-hmm. Because you know best, you know what works for your student more than anyone else out there. And I feel that is important. We remind ourselves that we know our student much more than everyone else out there. And they're going to say to you, okay, well, the student have failed this 2, 3, 4 times, give it to them again. Hell no, because what are they learning from that? Not a lot.
And if we can take this opportunity in this time that we've had to just remember that when we return back to our classrooms, when we return to seeing our students, that you did this, we did this. Not have happened if teachers did not say, okay, let me see what I can do. Let me figure this out. None of this, the education would have come to a complete halt. Mm-hmm. Educators. Mm-hmm. So as educators, just continue to empower yourselves, continue to believe in what you do, and we'll get through this together, and we will be successful moving on.
I do totally agree with you that we need to empower each other. We need to remind ourselves that we have done fantastic. We have done brilliantly. We knew nothing about this online platform. We were forced to navigate it. We were forced to learn it. We had no choice. We had to teach our students, that's it. And we know that we had to teach our students. It's either sink or swim, and none of us sank. We all swam across. And for that, as educators, we need to be really, really pleased with ourselves. We need to stop beating up on ourselves. We need to embrace it. We need to celebrate it. And I think it is so important as educators around the world. It doesn't matter what you're going through. We need to celebrate our achievement and what we've gone through and what we've done. I don't care about any other profession, because I know in terms of where we are, where we came from, and how well we've done. We do need to celebrate ourselves, because no one else celebrates us. All they do is hammer us, so we need to celebrate ourselves. Thank you very much, Myra, for that. It was a fantastic session again. Thank you very much, people out there in terms of my Facebook wall. I'll be back on tomorrow with another educator. I'm not too sure where she's coming from. I can't remember. And please share, like, and comment. When you do comment, I am going to have a look at it, or whoever the educator was with me also going to look at it and respond to your comments. Any questions you have, feel free to write it in the chat, and we are going to answer it the best way we can. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic evening and stay blessed wherever you are.
Thank you.